Hello everyone, TurtleAxe here, bringing you another Reverse 1999 video. Today I'm going over why 6 is a must pull, why 37 is a must pull, and what we do about it. And first, I think in order to understand why they are must pulls, it is important to first understand their kit and what they bring to the table. So first we'll start with 37 since she's coming up in 2 days, or in 1 day by the time this video is released. So Triangulation is a single target attack that deals mental damage plus additional Genesis damage. Genesis damage is basically true damage, quote unquote, where you bypass 100% of the enemy's defenses. As content gets tougher and tougher, and as we get tankier and tankier enemies, this becomes more and more relevant. So that's Triangulation. Curve Mapping is a mass attack where you deal mental damage plus additional Genesis damage to 2 enemies, and you also gain a stack of sturdiness to herself to improve her survivability. Sturdiness basically reduces damage taken by 25%, but the stack disappears after it triggers. And then 37's ultimate is a mass buff that grants 2 stacks of numeral perception to all allies, as well as gains 2 stacks of enlightenment for herself, as well as 2 Eureka stacks for herself. Now, numeral perception is basically a 10% attack buff that is granted to all allies, and her ultimate grants 2 stacks of this, so this benefit will trigger 2 times for each character, or maximum of 2 times for each character. And then the Eureka stacks, these are the blue bars that appear over 37's head that triggers her follow-up attacks. And then Enlightenment, the 2 stacks of Enlightenment, these are self stacks that trigger every time she casts an incantation, it deals additional 100% Genesis damage. So this basically improves her damage output as well as that of her party. And then 37's Insights, the first one's very important. After using an incantation, she gains 1 stack of Eureka. And then after another ally takes an extra action, she also gains Eureka. So she basically has 3 ways to gain Eureka. She gains Eureka by casting her incantation, or another ally doing follow-up attacks, such as Miss New Babel's ultimate, Lilia's, I believe, single target attack, Colabona's ultimate, and Joe's kit also does follow-up attacks. When at 5 Eureka, which is, by the way, the blue bars above her head, when all 5 of those bars fill up completely, you consume those 5 blue bars, the 5 Eureka, to cast Supplementary Formula. Supplementary Formula is the follow-up attack that I do have her animation on the screen there. This attack is regarded as a follow-up attack, does not grant Eureka, and this basically does supplemental damage. When entering battle, I'm talking about Insight 3 now, 37's crit rate is increased by 20%, so she is a crit support. All Genesis damage applied through incantations can critically hit. And this is huge. This is what allows her to crit with all her Genesis attacks. So this basically turns her into not only a support in which she is granting increased 10% attack to herself and her allies through her mass buff, the ultimate, but also she is dealing supplemental damage in the form of her follow-up attacks. And then one note here, for those of you who are curious, her portraits, there's a lot of discussion where content creators say that she is only good if she's P3 or higher. I think what they mean by that is she's the most consistent with her follow-up attacks. Because if we look at portrait level 1, when entering battle, her crit rate increases from 20% to 40%. At level 2, her supplementary formula's mental damage is increased to 180%, Genesis damage increased to 60%. And then for the Kingdom of Geometry Enlightenment, that's her ultimate mass buff increases to 3 stacks, and Eureka increased to 3 stacks. So what that means is that her Enlightenment, if I'm not mistaken, actually let me just confirm one thing here. Okay, so Enlightenment is what allows her to deal additional Genesis damage. So basically, this Portrait 3 increases 1 more stack of Enlightenment, which allows her to deal extra Genesis damage, and her Eureka increases by 1. So this is significant because if you want her follow-up attacks to trigger more consistently, all of a sudden after casting her ultimate, if you have 2 other stacks of Eureka, then her follow-up attack will trigger. And so Portrait 3 and Portrait 5 are the portraits which allow her to more consistently cast her ultimates, which I think is the bread and butter of her kit and what makes her so good, because Currently in the game, there's only a couple characters that are capable of dealing damage without requiring you to cast an incantation. One way is through empower incantation, right? Where instead of merging cards in order to have more powerful cards, you just level up your card. It doesn't you don't consume anything. And then another example would be Tooth Fairy's Baby Teeth, right? Where you consume the Baby Teeth and get the benefits of heal and crit rate and crit defense shred without casting an incantation. So 37 is the other unit who is able to passively deal damage without consuming an incantation. And just as a side note here, her Silent and Adoring is going to be the next event, Psycube, and this one is actually very good on 37. It's one of her best in slots. Basically, it is an incantation that increases the attack percentage of the unit, as well as when the carrier takes an extra action, damage dealt plus 12%, and Genesis damage through extra actions is also plus 10%. So this is a Psycube that is catered towards 37. Okay, so now that we've talked about 37, let's talk about 6 next. So 6, his kit is all about dealing debuffs and granting buffs, and then dealing damage that incentivizes you to have as many debuffs on the enemy as possible. Now his debuffs are a mass attack that deals mental damage to 2 enemies and grants 2 random collection of debuffs, and for 2 rounds. And the debuffs, there's a toolbox of debuffs. There's basically 6 different debuffs that are randomly applied. Crit defense shred of 30%, reality defense shred of 20%, mental defense shred of 20%, blind, miss aim, and fracture. Blind, basically, the debuff is damage bonus minus 30% when attacking one target. So they deal less damage to you. Miss aim, damage bonus minus 30% when attacking multiple targets. And then fracture, when attacked, takes additional Genesis damage. So these 6 buffs basically either improve the amount of damage you deal to that enemy or reduces the damage that they do to you, which is very good. And then not only that, but the debuff gains Eureka +1 when at 4 Eureka or less. And so he has a way to boost his own Eureka by casting debuffs. And then his buff is a single target buff. You basically choose, like in this case, in this image, he chose to buff Sonetto. So it purifies 2 random stats downs, negative status or control status, from a target. That is insanely good, by the way, because the only other characters who can do that, to my knowledge, are Pickles and Tooth Fairy. Tooth Fairy, to purify, she needs to cast her ult, and for Pickles to purify, Purify removes debuffs from the enemy, so I think that there might be one other character who can purify, but yeah, 6 is able to purify 2 units with just a level 1 buff, which is crazy, and grants the target 2 random collection of buffs. Wow, for 2 rounds. So the collection of buffs are increased penetration rate, what? Increased incantation might, increased mental defense, increased reality defense, vitalize, and ricochet. Whoa, so vitalize when the round starts, HP plus X amount. Whoa, so he can heal you too. And then ricochet when attacked, reflects Genesis damage. Whoa, okay. But that's not all. If at 5 or more Eureka, spends 5 Eureka to grant the target incantation empowerment to them for 2 rounds. Empower incantation, when a round begins, levels up 1 incantation plus 1. So this incentivizes you to have a lot of Eureka on him. Okay, wow. And then his ultimate is a single target attack that if at 6 or more Eureka, spends 6 Eureka to deal increased mental damage to the target for every stats down, negative status, or control status they have, increases up to 4 times. So this incentivizes you to have a lot of negative statuses, but it seems to me, I don't know how powerful or how much 6 hits, but if you want him as a pure support, you might want to just try to consume those Eureka stacks with his buff, because I think that buffing his DPSs might do a little bit more, but I don't know. His kit is just flat out broken. Okay, and then going over his insights. So max Eureka +1, so he can have up to 6 Eureka potentially, as you can see in the image there. At the end of the round, if any ally has 4 or more stats ups, gains a Eureka. Okay, so that's another way he can gain Eureka. When attacking a target with stats down, negative status, or control, his damage is increased. And then inside 3, before the ultimate takes effect, applies 2 random collections of debuffs Before the ultimate takes effect, apply 2 random collection of debuffs to all enemies for 2 rounds, and at the start of the round, applies 1 random collection of buffs effects to all allies for 2 rounds. Okay, so I did a little brainstorming for all the potential partners that you would want to pair up with 37, and this was what I came up with. And I further subdivided these units based on their role. So I do have DPS on one side, support in the middle, and then healer on the other side. And I just realized that the argument for whether 37 is a must pull or not is going to be very difficult to argue, because not only do we not have very good follow-up DPSs at the present time to support 37, but also the character after 37, who is 6 in this case, is the most broken support, as you saw based on the kit we just went over. Not to mention, we can't forget Regulus, who is another sub-DPS Star Afflatus unit, who is also really powerful. When I think about the characters who would pair up really well with 37, the main 2 that I can think of are Lilia and Colabona, because Lilia can cast her single target attack in order to generate a Eureka stack for 37, and then Colabona with her ultimate, after she does the hit, she also does a follow-up attack. And so I would say these 2 DPSs are the best ones to pair with 37. Miss New Babel is also worthy of discussion, but the problem is that unless you are in a 4-man raid, pairing Miss New Babel up with 37, especially at P037, is not going to have enough damage output to allow you to clear within a reasonable amount of turns. In Voyager, she's a defensive support, and unfortunately, being defensive in combination with more bosses that are immune to control has caused Voyager to fall off considerably. So I would say that right now, with the current state of the game, 37 will not be a must pull. However, down the road, we will have Joe in version 1.6, and Joe is an excellent follow-up attack DPS unit who will pair up fantastic with 37. But by that time, unfortunately, you will just be 1 patch away from having 37 and 6 be added to the general pool of characters, because any event character that's released now will be released 3 patches later. I mean, like added to the general pool 3 patches later. So for this reason, I think that regardless of whether or not 37 is a must pull, I think that it's very clear that if you are unable to get both 37 and 6, you really should skip 37 for 6. Now, going over the scenario as to how you can get both 37 and 6, let's say like you have a Colabona and you don't have Regulus and you really want 37 to take advantage of Colabona's follow-up attacks, or maybe you just want 37 because she's your waifu. So how do we make this work? Well, in one of my previous videos, I calculated that the entirety of the version 1.4 patch, you will get a total of 115 summons in the form of clear drops and unilogs, which means that assuming you hit hard pity, lose the 50-50, and hit hard pity again, you are 25 summons shy of guaranteeing 6. So if you want to pull 37 without giving up your guarantee for 6, you would need to go into the version 1.4 with over 25 pulls. And so let's say you go into version 1.4 with 45 pulls. What I could recommend to you is to, during the 37 banner, summon on 37 20 times. And if you get her, great. If not, just wait until she gets added to the general pool during 1.7, which will be in August, mid-July. Just basically wait until mid-July and then lose the 50-50 to her.